The weirdest jobs in medieval Europe. You jolt awake to the sound of church bells tolling in the distance. For a moment, disoriented, you try to remember where and when you are. The straw mattress beneath you pokes through its rough linen, covering, and the air in your tiny dwelling smells of wood smoke, unwashed bodies, and something less identifiable but distinctly unpleasant. Welcome to medieval Europe. It's not a dream. This is your reality now. You're about to discover that in this time, a person's occupation wasn't just how they earned their daily bread. It was their identity, their social status, and often their death sentence. The modern notion of pursuing your passion doesn't exist here. You do what you must to survive. And sometimes that means taking jobs that would make even the most hardened modern worker retch in horror. The gong farmer. A life immersed in human waste. You, awake in the darkened hours before dawn, though awake suggests you actually slept. The stench that has seeped into your skin, your clothes, your very being makes true rest impossible. You are a gong farmer, a collector and disposer of human excrement, and your workday is just beginning. The life of a gong farmer is structured around darkness. By royal decree, you're only permitted to work between 9 p.m. and 5 a.m., not out of concern for your well-being, but to spare the sensibilities of the general public who need not witness your foul occupation. You are, quite literally, the night soil worker. Your home is likely on the outskirts of town, not by choice but by law. Many municipalities had specific regulations about where gong farmers could live, which taverns they could frequent, and even which roads they could walk on. The social isolation is nearly as oppressive as the stench that follows you everywhere. Your clothing is simple and functional, typically a coarse linen shirt and breeches that are perpetually stained beyond recognition. No amount of washing ever fully removes the smell. Even on your rare day off, people can identify your profession from several yards away by the distinctive odor that clings to you like a second skin. Tonight, like every night, you'll descend into the cesspits beneath castles and manor houses, armed with a shovel, a rake, and perhaps a candle if you're fortunate. The medieval cesspit is not the modern septic tank. It's a hole in the ground where human waste collects for years at a time. Your job is to empty it, typically every 2 years when the stench becomes unbearable even for medieval sensibilities, which are already remarkably tolerant of odors by our standards. Mind the splash, your apprentice mutters as you lower yourself into tonight's cesspit, a particularly deep one beneath a wealthy merchant's home. The family has gone to their country estate for the week, unable to tolerate the smell any longer. If they knew you'd be standing neck deep in their collective waste tonight, they'd likely lose their appetites for a month. The work itself is horrific. You stand knee, waist, or even neck deep in human excrement, shoveling it into buckets that are then hauled to the surface. The waste must be transported outside the city walls, often to designated dumping grounds. If you're caught illegally dumping within the city, the penalties are severe. "Pass the bucket down," you call up, your voice echoing strangely in the confined space. The air is thick and fetid, making each breath a conscious effort. Many of your colleagues have passed out from the toxic fumes, methane, hydrogen sulfide, ammonia, and drowned in the very filth they were hired to remove. You know of at least 3 gong farmers who died this way last year alone. Despite being a social pariah, you're actually well compensated. Gong farmers in Tudor England earned around 6 pence per ton of waste removed, a decent wage for the era. The payment reflects not just the unpleasantness, but the genuine danger of your work. That's the last of it, your apprentice calls down. Hours later,
Your muscles ache from the repetitive shoveling, and your skin itches where the waste has touched it.
You'll develop sores later, you always do, but at least tonight's job is complete. One particularly notable incident in your profession's history occurred in 1326 when a gong farmer named Richard the Raker fell into a cesspit whose ceiling had
Rotted and drowned in human excrement. Your profession's mortality rate is staggering, but then again, in medieval Europe, what job isn't deadly in its own unique way? As you climb out of the pit at the end of your shift, covered in filth that
will never truly wash away, you might wonder if the 6 pence per ton is worth it. But in a world where starvation lurks around every corner, even a job immersed in human waste provides a strange form of security. Your evening meal is eaten alone. Few would share a table with you, and consists of whatever the cheapest tavern will serve you, typically through a back window rather than inside with the respectable patrons. Tomorrow night, another cesspit awaits. Don't worry, you're not dreaming. This is real history. The Plague Corpse Collector, Death's personal assistant. The sun rises on another grim day. The Black Death has gripped your town for weeks now, and as a corpse collector, your services have never been in higher demand. You don your distinctive uniform, a long waxed cloak, a hood, and the infamous beaked mask filled with herbs and spices to ward off the miasma you believe causes the disease. Your breakfast, if you can call it that, is a hunk of stale bread washed down with ale, the alcohol perhaps providing a small measure of mental protection against the horrors that await you. You need the fortification. Today you'll collect dozens of plague victims from their homes. Your cart stands ready outside, the wooden wheels already beginning to rot from the constant exposure to bodily fluids. You've lined it with a layer of straw, though it will do little, to absorb the putrescence that will soon fill it to overflowing. Bring out your dead! Your call echoes through the narrow streets as you push your cart along. The houses are eerily quiet in some neighborhoods, entire families wiped out, with no one left to respond to your call. In others, the wailing of mourners creates a dreadful chorus that follows you like a shadow. During the height of the Black Death in the mid-14th century, corpse collectors like you handled approximately 25 million bodies across Europe. In Florence, body collectors were called becchini, literally grave diggers, and were described by one chronicler as gangs of shovel-wielding grave diggers, stinking with the effluvia of death, earning more than they had ever done before. The Steen first house on your route today belongs to a tanner whose entire family succumbed within days of each other. As you approach, a neighbor points silently to the door, unable to meet your gaze. Nobody wants to interact with you more than absolutely necessary. You are a harbinger of death, a walking reminder of mortality. The scene inside is all too familiar. Bodies, in various stages of decomposition, black pustules evident on the exposed skin, the sickly sweet smell of death hanging in the air like a physical presence. You've become numb to such sights, though occasionally a particular detail, a child's doll, clutched in rigid fingers, a half-written letter on a table, breaks through your professional detachment. 4 here, your assistant notes, marking it in a crude ledger. Some municipalities pay by the body, and accurate counts are necessary for payment. You begin the grim work of wrapping the corpses in whatever is available, often just the bedsheets they died on, and carrying them to the cart. The job pays extraordinarily well. Supply and demand works even in plague times, but the risk is equally high. The clothing and belongings of plague victims can transfer the disease to you, making your life expectancy painfully short. Many corpse collectors turn to alcohol or herbs to numb themselves to both the risk and the psychological trauma. this?
One's still warm, your assistant says, lifting a middle-aged woman whose face is marred by the telltale black swellings. Probably went just hours ago. You nod grimly. The fresher the corpse, the more dangerous for you.
But there's no time for caution, not when dozens more houses await your attention today. As you collect bodies throughout the day, you'll notice how the disease has democratized death. Rich merchants and poor peasants alike fall victim, though. The wealthy can afford to die in their own beds rather than in the streets. You stack the bodies in your cart like cordwood. No time for dignity or individual treatment when death comes in such overwhelming numbers. By midday, your cart is full, and you make the first of several trips to the mass graves outside the city walls. The pit has been dug by conscripted labourers, another dangerous job few volunteer for, and already contains hundreds of corpses from previous days. No individual burials, no coffins for most, just bodies piled upon bodies with perhaps a thin layer of lime or soil between them. One historian notes that a third of all burials, whether in one of the trenches or in an ordinary grave, was in a coffin. The rest was simply dumped into the earth. A priest stands at a safe distance, offering hasty last rites over the mass grave. He doesn't come close. Even men of God fear the plague's touch. You and your assistant work quickly, emptying the cart before returning to town for the next load. There is no rest today. Death doesn't take holidays. The smell that surrounds you is indescribable, the stench of rotting flesh that no herb-filled mask can fully block. Even in your sleep, you can't escape it. It has permeated your clothing, your hair, your skin. People avoid you in the streets, crossing to the other side when they see you coming. You are a walking reminder of mortality in an age already obsessed with death. As night falls and you return to your humble dwelling, you count your coins, good payment for a terrible day's work. You wonder how long you'll last in this profession before joining the bodies in your cart. Few plague collectors survive more than a season or two. Already you've felt occasional swellings in your armpits that you pretend not to notice. You drink heavily that night, as you do every night. It's the only way to find sleep when the faces of the dead visit you in dreams. Don't worry, you're not dreaming. This is real history. The leech collector, blood in the water. Dawn breaks over a misty marsh. You, the leech collector, are already ankle-deep in murky water, your skirts hitched up to your knees. This isn't a job for the squeamish or those who fear blood loss. In an era when bloodletting is considered a primary medical treatment, your services are essential to the medical establishment of medieval Europe. Your tools are simple: a stick, perhaps a small net, and your own bare legs. Yes, your primary collection. Method is to wade into leech-infested waters and allow the creatures to attach themselves to your skin. When they've gorged themselves on your blood and become visibly engorged, you pluck them off and place them in a small container filled with water and perhaps some moss to keep them moist. Found a big one, you mutter to yourself, feeling the familiar pinch as a particularly large specimen attaches to your calf. The initial bite stings. Leeches inject an anesthetic, but you can still feel the first sharp prick. Then becomes a dull sensation as the leech begins to feed. Your clothing is practical, simple garments that can be easily hitched up while wading. Leech collectors were often women, occupying yet another dangerous occupation at the bottom of the social hierarchy. While physicians and barber surgeons enjoyed relative prestige, you who provide their essential tools remain impoverished and invisible. The marsh around you is alive with sounds, birds calling, insects buzzing, the occasional splash of something, larger, moving through deeper water. You're careful to avoid the areas where locals have spotted snakes or other dangerous creatures. The leeches are parasites enough. You don't need additional hazards. After an hour, your legs are dotted with feeding leeches, each swelling as it draws your blood. The sensation is oddly numbing after years in this profession, though novices often faint at the sight of their own blood being drawn multiple times simultaneously. The irony of your profession isn't lost on you. You lose blood daily so that others can be therapeutically bled by medical practitioners. Bloodletting was believed to restore the body's balance of humours, curing everything from fever to melancholy. Your leeches are in high demand at apothecaries and physicians' offices across Europe. That's enough for now, you decide, noting the lightheadedness that signals you've donated enough blood for one morning. Carefully, you begin removing the leeches, placing each bloated specimen into your container. Some collectors use salt to make them detach, but you prefer a gentler approach, sliding a fingernail under their oral sucker to break the seal. Killing or injuring the leeches reduces their value. The dangers of your profession are numerous. Beyond the obvious blood loss from feeding dozens of leeches daily, you're constantly at risk of infections. The same wetlands that harbour leeches also contain numerous other parasites and bacteria. Without access to antibiotics or proper wound care, a simple cut can become life-threatening. Additionally, the prolonged exposure to cold water leads many in your profession to develop arthritis and other chronic conditions at a young age. Emerging from the marsh, you take stock of your harvest, perhaps 20 leeches of varying sizes, a decent morning's work. The larger specimens will fetch better prices, particularly those that haven't been used before. Virgin leeches, as they're sometimes called, are preferred by physicians treating nobility. Your payment is meagre compared to the health risks you endure. Leech collectors lived primarily as peasants, barely earning enough to survive. By the early 20th century, your profession would become obsolete as medical science began questioning the efficacy of bloodletting. But in medieval Europe, you're an unsung pillar of the medical establishment. Midday finds you at the local apothecary negotiating prices for your squirming harvest. The apothecary examines each leech carefully, rejecting those that seem too small or sluggish. You've learned to inspect them yourself before presenting them for sale, but sometimes a marginal specimen slips through. 6 copper for the lot, he offers, clearly undervaluing your goods. Your legs bear the evidence of your labour, dozens of small wounds that will take days to heal completely, but such physical sacrifice counts for little in these negotiations. 10, you counter. 3 of them are extraordinarily large, and all were collected this morning. Eventually, you settle on 8 copper coins, enough for a modest meal, and perhaps some salve for the more inflamed bites on your legs. Tomorrow, you'll return to the marsh to begin again, offering your own blood as bait in an endless cycle of parasitic commerce. As you return to your humble dwelling, little more than a shack on the edge of the village, you clean your bites with water and apply a poultice of herbs you've gathered yourself. Self-treatment is necessary in your profession. No physician would waste their time on someone of your station, particularly when your ailments are self-inflicted in the pursuit of your trade. Another day, another bleeding, you mutter, the dark humour typical of those in your profession. Tomorrow's dawn will find you back in the marsh, beginning the cycle anew. Don't worry, you're not dreaming. This is real history. The rat catcher, vermin's worst nightmare. The morning light filters through the cracks in your humble dwelling. You rise, reaching for your specialized equipment, nets, traps, cages, and perhaps a small terrier dog trained to hunt rats. You are the rat catcher, a profession simultaneously reviled and essential in medieval cities plagued by rodent infestations. Your attire is distinctive and somewhat theatrical. Many rat catchers adopted flamboyant clothing to attract attention, complete with dead rats displayed on poles as advertisements of their skills. After all, in this line of work, reputation is everything. The more rats you're known to have caught, the more work comes your way. "Come on, Scratch," you call to your terrier, a scrappy little dog with an uncanny talent for detecting rats in
walls and beneath floorboards. The dog jumps eagerly at your call. For him, this is not work, but a thrilling game with deadly consequences for his prey. Breakfast is whatever you can afford, perhaps some gruel or bread if you've had a good week.
Rat catchers occupied a strange social position, necessary for public health but associated with filth and disease. The irony, of course, is that you're actually helping to prevent disease, though nobody in medieval Europe yet understands the connection between rats, fleas, and the bubonic plague. Your first call today is to a bakery where rats have been stealing grain and contaminating stored flour. The baker greets you with a mixture of disgust and relief. You're needed, but your presence acknowledges an infestation that reflects poorly on his establishment. "They're mostly in the storage room," he explains, keeping his distance. "Biggest
Ones I've ever seen. One of them attacked my assistant yesterday." You nod knowingly.
Urban rats grow large on the abundant food waste of medieval cities, and they become bold when their numbers are high. This job will require more than just your terrier. Your methods vary depending on your resources and experience. Some rat catchers use simple traps or poisons, others employ trained animals, terriers, ferrets, or cats, to hunt the vermin. The most theatrical rat catchers in France would walk through city streets with caged cats and a stick displaying dead rats, shouting, "Mort aux rats," death to the rats, to advertise their services. Inside the bakery's storage room, you release Scratch to flush out the hiding rodents while you position traps at likely escape routes. The dog works methodically, sniffing along walls and barking sharply when he detects a rat. When one bolts from behind a stack of flour sacks, the terrier is a blur of motion, catching the rat with practiced efficiency and shaking it violently to break its neck. "Good boy," you murmur, taking the dead rat and adding it to your collection. By midday, you've caught over a dozen, some through traps, others with the dog's assistance. The baker seems satisfied, though the true test will be whether the infestation returns in the coming weeks. The job is dangerous in ways that aren't immediately obvious. Beyond the risk of rat bites, which frequently became infected in an era, before antibiotics, you're constantly exposed to the diseases rats carry. The very fleas that jump from rats to humans carrying Yersinia pestis, the bacterium responsible for the bubonic plague, find you an equally attractive host as you handle rat-infested areas. Additionally, the poisons used to kill rats are equally dangerous to humans. Arsenic compounds were common rat poisons, and prolonged exposure could lead to chronic arsenic poisoning, with symptoms including skin lesions, cancer, and eventually death. HR didn't exist, obviously, but workplace trauma definitely did. Your next stop is a nobleman's house where rats have been disturbing the lady's sleep. Here, discretion is key. The wealthy don't want their rat problems publicly known, associating such infestations with poor hygiene and lower-class dwellings. You'll be paid extra to keep this matter private, the steward informs you in hushed tones. And you're to use the servant's entrance only. The contrast between your two jobs today highlights the democratic nature of rat infestations. They plague the rich and poor alike, though the wealthy can afford more frequent and discreet extermination services. You set to work, Scratch trotting at your heels, nose already twitching at the scent of rodents. Despite these risks, rat catching was considered an important enough profession that some rat catchers were employed directly by city governments. In later centuries, some royal courts even had official rat catchers. Samuel Stubbs held this position in one court and was even paid for his mourning livery when a royal died. As evening approaches, you count your day's catch. Payment is often per rat, so a good haul means a better dinner. You might sell the rat carcasses to tanners who use rat skins in their craft, or to certain medicinal practitioners who believe in the curative properties of rat organs. Nothing goes to waste in medieval Europe. 23 today, Scratch. You tell the dog, who watches eagerly as you count out the dead rats. Not bad for a day's work. The terrier wags his tail, perhaps the only living creature who truly appreciates your skills without reservation or disgust. Tomorrow brings more rats, more infestations, more opportunities to practice your peculiar but necessary craft. You check your traps one last time before sleep, ensuring they're ready for the next day's hunt. Don't worry, you're not dreaming. This is real history. The Whipping Boy. Taking pain for princely gain. You wake in a chamber far more luxurious than most medieval citizens will ever see. But don't be fooled, your life is not one of privilege, despite your fine surroundings. You are a whipping boy, educated alongside a young prince or royal, but with one crucial difference. When the prince misbehaves, you receive the punishment. Your clothing is of good quality, likely provided by the royal household. You receive the same education as the prince, learning Latin, mathematics, history, and other subjects befitting nobility. You eat well, sleep in a comfortable bed, and want for little in terms of material comfort. But the psychological cost is immense. Latin translations this morning, Your Highness, the tutor announces, placing texts before both you and the young prince you serve. You observe the royal child from the corner of your eye, already anticipating his restlessness. He was up late last night, participating in court festivities from which you were excluded, and his attention this morning is clearly elsewhere. The logic behind your position is perverse, but considered sound in medieval thinking. The prince's royal status places him beyond physical punishment from his tutors. However, he still needs discipline. The solution? Appoint a companion, typically a boy of minor noble birth, to be punished in his stead. Your Highness, please concentrate on your text, the tutor admonishes. The prince sighs dramatically and returns to his work, but only for moments before beginning to doodle in the margins of his parchment. You feel a knot forming in your stomach. His inattention will soon become your pain. Sure enough, when the time comes to present translations, the prince's work is incomplete and riddled with errors. The tutor's face darkens as he reviews it, then turns to you with a grim expression that you've come to dread. Since His Highness has failed to complete his assigned work, you will receive 5 strokes. The words are delivered without emotion. This is routine, the accepted way of things. You rise silently and assume the position, hands braced against the wall. When the prince fails to complete his Latin exercises, you feel the sting of the rod. When he speaks out of turn or neglects his studies, you suffer the consequences. Hope is that the prince, witnessing his companion's suffering for his misdeeds, will develop empathy and reform his behavior. Whether this actually works depends entirely on the character of the young royal. Some princes might be moved to better behavior, while others might simply enjoy the spectacle of punishment without personal consequence. This particular prince, let's call him Edward, does show some remorse. His face pales slightly as each stroke lands across your shoulders, and later, when you're alone, he mutters a brief apology. It's not much, but it's something. You've heard stories of whipping boys serving princes who derived actual pleasure from watching their companions suffer, making deliberate mistakes to ensure punishment. The historical record on whipping boys is somewhat debated by scholars. While the practice appears in literature and historical accounts, the extent of its use across medieval Europe remains uncertain. However, there are several documented cases, including that associated with Edward VI of England, who reportedly had a whipping boy named Barnaby Fitzpatrick. After the morning's lessons, you accompany the prince to his other activities, perhaps weapons training or horseback riding. These are more enjoyable as physical activities rarely result in vicarious punishment. Indeed, you might even excel in these areas, though you must be careful never to outshine your royal companion too obviously. "You're improving," the prince comments, as you practice swordplay with wooden weapons. It's as close to friendship as your strange relationship allows, a complex bond forged through shared experiences but perpetually imbalanced by your designated roles. Despite the physical and psychological torment, being a whipping boy did offer certain advantages. You receive an education far beyond what your birth might otherwise allow, and you form a close bond with the future monarch. Many whipping boys went on to receive titles, lands, and positions of influence when their royal companions ascended to the throne. It's somewhat analogous to the equally unpleasant position of groom of the stool, the person who assisted the king with his toileting needs, which, despite its disagreeable duties, was actually a coveted position due to the intimate access it provided to the monarch. Dinner is taken with the prince in his private chambers, another privilege that comes with your peculiar position. The food is excellent by medieval standards: fresh bread, roasted meats, even imported fruits that common folk might never taste in their lifetime. You eat carefully, mindful of the etiquette you've been taught alongside the prince. "Do you hate me?" the prince asks suddenly, catching you off guard. It's late evening, and you're both preparing for sleep in the royal chambers, where you maintain a smaller bed near his grand one. "No, your highness," you answer truthfully. How could you explain the complex emotions of your position? Resentment, yes, but also understanding of the system you're both trapped within. He by birth into responsibility, you by opportunity mixed with sacrifice. As you go through your day of lessons alongside the prince, you remain vigilant for his missteps, knowing each one will result in your suffering. The welts on your back are a physical record of the prince's education, a strange ledger of royal development written in pain. In the darkness, you wonder about your future. If this prince remembers your sacrifices kindly when he ascends to power, your difficult years might translate to lifetime security and position. If not, well, there are few careers for former whipping boys whose skills consist primarily of Latin translation and absorbing punishment. Don't worry, you're not dreaming. This is real history. The executioner, death's professional. Dawn breaks over the town square where a scaffold stands ready. You prepare your tools methodically: axes, swords, ropes, each maintained with professional care. Your face is partially covered. Anonymity is both your protection and your prison. You are the executioner, perhaps the most feared and isolated professional in medieval society. Your clothing is often distinctive. Some executioners wore particular colors or styles that immediately identified their profession to the public. In some regions, you might wear a hood or mask to conceal your identity, protecting you from revenge by the families of those you execute. The psychological burden of this anonymity is considerable. You become not a person, but a function, a walking embodiment of authority's ultimate sanction. Sharpen it again, you instruct your apprentice, who works the whetstone against the execution axe with practiced motions. Today's primary client is a nobleman convicted of treason, a high-profile execution requiring perfect performance. A botched first stroke would reflect poorly on your professional reputation and might even incite the crowd to violence. Breakfast is solitary. Few wish to break bread with death's handmaiden, despite performing a function sanctioned by law and, often, religion. Executioners were social pariahs. You likely live in accommodations provided near the jail or in a designated area outside town walls. In some cities, executioners were forbidden from entering certain public spaces or using the same doors as respectable citizens. Your apprentice, often a son or other relative, as few voluntarily entered this profession, brings food purchased from a tavern keeper who adds a substantial surcharge for serving the executioner's household. You eat in silence, mentally rehearsing the day's grim task. The crowd will be large today, the apprentice notes. Crier has been announcing it since yesterday. You nod grimly. Public executions were social events in medieval Europe, drawing spectators from all walks of life. For a nobleman's beheading, the audience might include everyone from peasants to lesser nobility, each with their own reasons for witnessing death's spectacle. Your workday varies. Public executions are relatively rare events even in medieval times, so you might have other duties. Many executioners also performed torture to extract confessions, carried out lesser punishments like floggings or brandings, and sometimes even acted as street cleaners or disposed of animal carcasses, all tasks considered unclean and suited to your already marginal status. By mid-morning, you're at the scaffold, making final preparations as the crowd gathers. The condemned will arrive soon, accompanied by guards and perhaps a priest. Some executioners spoke with their victims beforehand, offering advice on how to position themselves for a quick death or even requesting forgiveness for the act they were about to perform. Remember a single stroke, you mutter to yourself, testing the axe's edge one final time. The professional executioner takes pride in technical skill. A clean beheading with a single stroke was the mark of expertise, while a botched execution could lead to public outrage and sometimes danger from the crowd. You've spent years perfecting your technique, understanding the anatomy of the neck and the precise weight and balance of your axe or sword. The condemned arrives, walking with surprising dignity despite his chains. Some faced their end with courage, others with terror or defiance. The most difficult executions were those where the condemned fought or begged, disrupting the carefully choreographed ritual of judicial death. This one, however, seems resigned to his fate. After the official reads the crimes and sentence, the nobleman is allowed final words, brief expressions of loyalty to the king despite the treason charge, and a request for divine mercy. Standard fare for political executions. You position him carefully on the block, adjusting his neck to expose it properly. Some executioners developed a routine of whispered instructions to help position the condemned correctly. Stretch your neck forward. Rest your chin here. Yes, that's right. The moment itself is almost anticlimactic after the extensive preparation. A swift, practiced arc of the axe, the solid thunk as it completes its work, the reaction of the crowd. You've performed well. The head is severed cleanly with a single stroke. Your apprentice steps forward to lift it by the hair, showing it to the crowd as proof that justice has been done. Payment comes from multiple sources. The state provides a base salary, but traditionally, executioners also received the clothing and sometimes other possessions of the executed. In some regions, you might collect fees from onlookers or even from the condemned themselves, who might pay for a sharper axe and thus a quicker death. After the scaffold is cleared, you retreat to your quarters to clean your tools and change. From your execution garments, the psychological toll is immense. Even in a society that embraced public execution as both justice and entertainment, those who performed the act were viewed with superstitious dread. Many executioners turned to alcohol to numb the psychological effects of their profession. Others developed elaborate rituals or religious practices to cleanse themselves spiritually after performing an execution. 3 more scheduled for next month, your apprentice informs you, reviewing the official notifications. 2 hangings and 1 breaking on the wheel. You nod, making mental notes about the specific preparations each will require. The wheel, a particularly gruesome execution where the condemned's limbs are broken and then they're woven through a large wheel to die slowly, requires different skills than the clean efficiency of beheading. As you clean your blade at day's end, you might reflect on the strange paradox of your position, essential to the functioning of medieval justice, yet reviled for performing that very function. Your children will likely follow in your profession, as few other careers are open to the executioner's family. It is a legacy of isolation passed through generations. They celebrate what I do, then curse my existence, you mutter, pouring another drink. The executioner's paradox, required but rejected, has no resolution in medieval society. Don't worry, you're not dreaming. This is real history. The professional mourner. Grief for hire. Morning arrives and you dress carefully in dark, somber clothing. Today's job is a funeral for a wealthy merchant. The family has requested 6 mourners, and you'll be paid extra if your performance is particularly moving. You are a professional mourner, hired to enhance the apparent grief at funerals. The practice of hiring mourners dates back to ancient times and persisted throughout the medieval period. Your services ensure that a death is appropriately acknowledged with the correct level of visible grief, a matter of social status as much as emotional expression. In medieval society, the size of a funeral procession and the intensity of mourning directly reflected the deceased's importance. Remember, he was beloved by all, the funeral organizer instructs your group as you gather near the church. His generosity was legendary, his business practices beyond reproach. This last detail makes one of your colleagues suppress a knowing smile. The merchant's reputation for sharp practices was well known in town, but you'll all praise his virtues loudly and convincingly nonetheless. That's what you're paid for. Your breakfast is modest, perhaps bread and cheese, provided by the funeral home or family. Professional mourners came from various social backgrounds, but many were women from lower economic classes who found in mourning a rare opportunity to earn income independently. New girl, you'll follow Marjorie's lead, the head mourner, instructs a young woman who has recently joined your troupe. When she wails, you wail. When she tears at her hair, you do the same, but
Less dramatically, you're a distant cousin, not his mother. Your techniques are varied and theatrical.
you've mastered the art of weeping on command. The dramatic tearing of clothing, the collapse to your knees in apparent overwhelming grief. Some professional mourners specialized in particular expressions of mourning, the poetic recitation of the deceased's virtues, the singing of laments, or the most dramatic physical manifestations of sorrow. The funeral begins with a procession from the deceased's home to the church. Your troupe positions itself strategically among the genuine mourners. Your performance is calibrated to enhance, rather than overshadow, the family's grief. The widow, a woman of genuine dignity, acknowledges your presence with a slight nod. She understands the social necessity of your role. Oh, what a loss, you cry out at an appropriate moment, voice breaking perfectly on the last word. Never shall we see his like again. Around you, other professional mourners take up the lament, creating waves of grief that wash over the procession. The job requires significant emotional regulation. You must appear convincingly devastated, while maintaining professional distance. Too little emotion, and you won't earn your fee. too much personal involvement, and you'll be unable to sustain your career through multiple funerals each week. Inside the church, you modulate your performance. More restrained, but still visibly grief-stricken. Occasional muffled sobs punctuate the priest's words at tactful intervals. One of your colleagues specializes in the sudden, overcome by emotion collapse that requires others to fan and support her. A dramatic highlight of many funerals that draws appreciative murmurs from the congregation. He was too good for this.
World, you whisper loudly to a genuine mourner beside you who nods in solemn agreement. This is another aspect of your job, reinforcing the deceased's virtues through strategic comments that shape the community's memory of them. Payment varies
Based on the prominence of the deceased and the elaborateness of the mourning requested. A simple background wail might earn a few coins, while leading the procession with dramatic lamentations for a noble's funeral could provide enough income to support you for weeks. There's a strange psychological aspect to your work. Studies of modern professional mourners suggest that despite the performative nature of the grief, many experience real emotional effects from their work. The body doesn't always distinguish between enacted and genuine emotion, leading to actual feelings of sadness or emotional drainage after particularly intense performances. After the church service, the procession continues to the burial site. Here, your performance reaches its crescendo as the body is lowered into the ground. You weep uncontrollably, support the overcome colleague, and generally ensure that the deceased enters the afterlife accompanied by an appropriate display.
of earthly sorrow.
Dust to dust, the priest intones, and on cue you fall to your knees, head bowed in perfect grief. Years of practice have taught you exactly how to position yourself, visible to the important funeral attendees, but never center stage, which belongs to the family. As the funeral concludes, you receive your payment discreetly. Some families prefer to maintain the illusion that all grief at their loved one's funeral was genuine, paying you away from the eyes of other attendees. You'll likely have another funeral tomorrow. Death is a constant in medieval Europe, where life expectancy rarely exceeds 40 years for even the wealthy. 2 more tomorrow, the head mourner informs you as your group disperses, professional demeanor returning the moment you're out of public view. A child at dawn and an alderman at midday. You nod, mentally preparing for the different performances. Each will require the unbearable tragedy of young death demands a different quality of grief than the dignified sorrow for an elder's passing. Tonight, like many professional mourners, you might gather with colleagues at a tavern, the day's performances dissected and critiqued over ale, a strange but necessary decompression after hours spent in artificial sorrow. Don't worry, you're not dreaming. This is real history. The barber surgeon, cutting hair and limbs. The morning sun streams through your shop window, illuminating the distinctive red and white striped pole outside, the universal symbol of your dual profession. You are a barber surgeon, responsible for everything from fashionable haircuts to tooth extractions, bloodletting, and minor surgeries. In medieval Europe, the medical and grooming arts were strangely intertwined. Your shop is modestly equipped with the tools of your diverse trade: scissors and razors for haircuts and shaving, bowls for catching blood during phlebotomy, a collection of rudimentary surgical tools, various herbal preparations, and perhaps a chair more comfortable than most medieval furniture to accommodate your customers during longer procedures. Just to trim today, or shall I examine that tooth that troubled you last month? You ask your first customer, a merchant whose business brings him to your shop regularly. He grimaces and points to his jaw. The tooth has worsened. I can barely sleep. You nod sympathetically and begin preparing for an extraction. As a barber surgeon, your training came through apprenticeship rather than university study. Physicians, the highest class of medieval medical practitioners, considered surgery beneath them, leaving procedures involving blood and manual manipulation to practitioners like you. The preparation involves a quick hand washing, you're more hygienic than many in your profession, and the arrangement of tools, extraction forceps, a small knife for cutting the gum if necessary, and various tinctures to help with pain and subsequent bleeding. You also ready a bowl for the extracted tooth and resulting blood. Drink this first, you instruct, handing the customer a small cup of alcohol mixed with herbs that will dull the pain somewhat. It's primitive anesthesia, but better than nothing. While he drinks, you sharpen your tools and prepare clean cloths. Open wide and grip the chair arms you direct, positioning yourself for the best access to the decayed molar. Without modern anesthesia, speed is essential. The faster the extraction, the less prolonged the patient's suffering. The extraction itself is a violent affair by modern standards. You grip the tooth firmly with specialized forceps and wrench it free with practiced strength, working it back and forth to break the connective tissues. Blood flows freely, and the customer's muffled scream is a common sound in barber surgeon shops across Europe. It's done, you announce, displaying the blackened tooth before dropping it into a bowl. Rinse with this. You hand him a solution of wine and herbs to help clean the wound and provide some antiseptic protection. Though the germ theory of disease remains centuries away, experience has taught barber surgeons that certain preparations reduce the risk of putrefaction. Beyond dental work, your practice encompasses a wide range of procedures. Bloodletting is perhaps the most common, the removal of blood to balance the body's humours, according to medieval medical theory. For this, you might use a sharp knife to open a vein, venesection, or apply leeches to draw blood more gradually. Minor surgeries also fall within your purview, lancing boils, setting simple fractures, suturing wounds, and even amputations when necessary. Without effective anesthesia or antiseptics, these procedures were excruciating for patients and carried high risks of infection and death. Between medical procedures, you perform the barber side of your profession, cutting hair, trimming beards, and providing a space for men to socialize and exchange news. This dual role makes your shop an important community hub, a place where information flows as freely as blood during phlebotomy. Have you heard about the new tax the Guild is considering? Asks an afternoon customer as you trim his beard. This social aspect of your work provides both community connection and valuable information. Political changes, business opportunities, potential clients in need of your services. Your income varies widely depending on your reputation and the wealth of your clientele. A simple haircut might cost a few pennies, while surgical procedures command substantially higher fees. Many barber surgeons also sold medicines and potions as additional income streams. As evening approaches, you clean your tools and prepare for tomorrow. Unlike many medieval professionals, your work is relatively steady. People always need haircuts, and illness or injury can strike anyone. The red and white pole outside, representing blood and bandages, promises both grooming and healing to all who enter. Another tooth extraction tomorrow, you remind yourself, checking your appointment ledger. And Lord Berkeley's steward needs bloodletting. You sharpen your instruments one final time before closing shop. The metallic scrape a fitting end to a day balancing between cosmetic services and medical procedures. Don't worry, you're not dreaming. This is real history. The Toscher, sewer hunter. Darkness surrounds you as you wade through knee-deep sewage, your small lantern casting eerie shadows on the brick walls of London's underground sewers. You are a Toscher, a scavenger who searches the foul underworld of sewers for lost valuables. It's dangerous, disgusting work, but surprisingly lucrative for those with strong stomachs and stronger constitutions. Your clothing is practical and already ruined. heavy boots to protect against sharp objects hidden beneath the filth, sturdy trousers tied at the ankles to prevent rats from climbing up your legs, and multiple layers on top to ward off the perpetual chill of the underground. A cloth wrapped around your face provides minimal protection against the overwhelming stench. "Something shiny over there," your partner mutters, pointing his lantern toward a corner where sewage has formed a small eddy. Working in pairs is safer, though sewers claim many lives through toxic gases, sudden flooding, or simple disorientation in the labyrinthine tunnels. Breakfast was substantial. Toshas needed calories to sustain the physically demanding work, though you ate hours ago before descending into this underworld at dawn. Some Toshas believe eating immediately before entering the sewers increases the risk of nausea from the overwhelming stench. You reach into the filth, feeling carefully with gloved hands for whatever caught your partner's eye. Success. A silver spoon, tarnished but valuable, has become lodged against a brick. You clean it cursorily against your already filthy clothing and add it to your collection pouch. The Tosha's workday revolves around timing and knowledge. You must enter the sewers at low tide when water levels are manageable and exit before the tide rises or sudden rainstorms cause flooding. Experienced Toshas develop mental maps of the sewer system, learning which areas tend to collect valuable items and which present the greatest dangers. "Tide's turning early," your partner warns, checking his pocket watch, a prized possession acquired during a particularly successful expedition. We should head back to the entrance. The dangers facing Toshas were numerous and lethal. Sudden releases of water could drown you in minutes. Pockets of methane and hydrogen sulfide gas, known as sewer gas, could asphyxiate you or even explode if your lantern flame ignited them. Rats carried disease and could attack in swarms if threatened. The sewage itself contained countless pathogens, and any cut or scrape risked serious infection. Despite these hazards, the financial rewards kept you returning to the fetid tunnels. On good days, Toshas could find coins, jewelry, silverware, and other valuables accidentally dropped into toilets or washed down street drains. Some lucky Toshas discovered gold rings or even small caches of coins, lost by those who used the sewers as hiding places. Found something big to you call your hand closing around a heavy metal object buried in the muck. Pulling it free reveals a pewter candlestick, bent but complete. Today has been productive. The spoon, several coins, the candlestick, and various metal scraps that can be sold for recycling. Beyond the items of obvious value, Toshas collected anything that could be sold, scraps of metal, bones for bone grinders, and even items with more specialized markets. Some Toshas developed relationships with particular merchants or pawnbrokers who would purchase their findings without asking too many questions about provenance. As you near the exit point, a maintenance access near the river, you and your partner take inventory of the day's haul. The silver spoon alone might feed you for a week if it's genuine silver. The candlestick will fetch a decent price from a metal dealer who will melt it down. Emerging into daylight, you're a startling sight, covered in filth, reeking of sewage, eyes adjusting painfully to the sudden brightness. Passers-by give you a wide berth, some holding handkerchiefs to their noses. The social stigma of your profession is just another price you pay for the relative financial freedom it provides. "Same time tomorrow?" your partner asks, already counting the coins from today's expedition. You nod, knowing that despite the risks and disgusting conditions, few other professions offer comparable earnings for someone of your social status. The evening brings a visit to a pawnbroker who specializes in dealing with Toshas, followed by a much-needed bath, one of your few luxuries. Tomorrow you'll descend again into the underworld, hunting for treasures in the most unlikely of places. Don't worry, you're not dreaming. This is Real History. The conclusion, your medieval career options. As we've travelled through this parade of medieval occupations, you've experienced just a fraction of the bizarre, disgusting, dangerous and occasionally fascinating jobs that kept medieval society functioning. From the depths of cesspits to the heights of royal chambers, from dealing with the dead to predicting the future through urine, medieval workers endured conditions that modern workplace safety regulations would shut down in seconds. What's striking about many of these professions is how essential they were despite their low status. The gong farmer prevented cities from drowning in their own waste. The rat catcher helped limit disease spread, even if no one understood the connection between rats and plague at the time. The executioner enforced the ultimate sanction of law. Each played their role in the intricate ecosystem of medieval society. These jobs also reveal much about medieval priorities and knowledge. The existence of professional sin-eaters speaks to the deep religious anxieties of the era. The piss prophet reflects medieval medical understanding based on ancient theories of humours. The Resurrection Man highlights the tension between advancing medical knowledge and religious prohibitions. Many of these professions created distinct subcultures with their own customs, jargon, and social structures. Executioners often married into other executioner families, creating dynasties of death. Gong farmers developed specialized techniques passed from master to apprentice. Even in the lowest occupations, professional pride and specialized knowledge existed. The social isolation experienced by many of these workers, from the executioner forbidden to enter certain public spaces to the sin-eater shunned by the community they served, reminds us that medieval society maintained strict boundaries between the clean and unclean, boundaries that often had more to do with superstition than actual hygiene. Perhaps most striking is how these professions reflect a society where the collective need outweighed individual comfort or dignity. Nobody wanted to be a gong farmer, but everyone benefited from their work. The executioner was necessary for justice, but punished socially for fulfilling that necessity. Medieval society acknowledged these paradoxes without resolving them. Pragmatism outweighed philosophical consistency. The physical toll of medieval work far exceeded anything we consider acceptable today. Bodies were worn out by repetitive, dangerous labor performed without ergonomic considerations or safety equipment. 8. Leech collectors' legs bore hundreds of small scars. A lime burner's lungs gradually calcified from inhaled particles. A fuller's skin cracked and peeled from constant exposure to urine and caustic substances. These occupational hazards were simply accepted as the cost of survival. Yet within these harsh realities, people found ways to endure, through dark humor, shared among colleagues, through pride in specialized skills, through the creation of professional communities and traditions. The tosher who discovered a valuable ring felt genuine triumph. The executioner who performed a clean beheading took professional satisfaction in his skill. Even in the grimiest occupations, human dignity and the capacity for pride in workmanship persisted. As you return to your comfortable modern existence with indoor plumbing, workplace safety regulations, and career options that don't involve drowning, in human waste perhaps you'll feel a moment of gratitude. Your modern job may have its frustrations, endless emails, pointless meetings, difficult co-workers, but at least you don't have to wade through leech-infested waters using your own legs as bait. The next time you're having a bad day at work, remember the gong farmer standing waist-deep in a cesspit, or the plague corpse collector stacking bodies in his cart. Suddenly that passive-aggressive email from accounting doesn't seem so bad. Subscribe if you'd rather not be a medieval leech.
Wrangler, don't worry, you're not dreaming. This was real history. And aren't you glad it's history?